When a racist cop throws hot coffee at a woman during a routine stop, he has no idea he's just assaulted the town's new police chief, and his worst nightmare is only beginning. Subscribe to the channel and follow along to see how this powerful story unfolds. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. The sun was just beginning to rise over the quiet suburban town of Cedar Ridge, casting a golden glow over the streets. Officer Rick Dalton, a seasoned cop with a reputation for being tough on crime, was on his morning patrol. He sipped his steaming cup of coffee, the bitter taste helping him shake off the remnants of a restless night. As he cruised down Maple Avenue, he noticed a sleek black sedan parked near the curb. The car was pristine, but something about it made him uneasy. Maybe it was the out-of-state plates, or maybe it was the fact that the driver, a middle-aged African-American woman, was sitting in the car, seemingly lost in thought. Rick pulled up behind the sedan and turned on his flashing lights. He adjusted his mirrored sunglasses and stepped out of his patrol car, his boots crunching on the gravel. As he approached the vehicle, he noticed the woman glance at him in the rearview mirror. Her expression was calm, almost too calm for someone who had just been pulled over. Rick tapped on the window with his knuckles, signaling for her to roll it down. "License and registration, ma'am," he said, his voice firm but not unkind. The woman hesitated for a moment before reaching into her glove compartment. As she handed over her documents, Rick couldn't help but notice the expensive watch on her wrist and the designer handbag on the passenger seat. His suspicion grew. What was a woman like her doing in a neighborhood like this? Rick took the documents and walked back to his patrol car, his mind racing. He ran her license through the system, but nothing came up. No warrants, no priors, not even a parking ticket. Still, something about her didn't sit right with him. He decided to give her a hard time, just to see how she would react. He returned to her car and handed back her license. "You know why I pulled you over?" he asked, his tone accusatory. The woman raised an eyebrow. "No, officer, I don't. Enlighten me." Rick smirked. "You were parked in a no-parking zone. That's a violation." The woman glanced at the empty street and then back at Rick. "Officer, there are no signs indicating that this is a no-parking zone. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" Rick's smirk faded. He didn't like being challenged, especially by someone who looked like they had never faced a day of hardship in their life. "Listen, lady," he said, his voice rising, "I don't appreciate your tone. Maybe you should show a little more respect to the people who keep this town safe." The woman's eyes narrowed, but she remained calm. "Respect is earned, officer, not demanded. And from where I'm standing, you're not doing a very good job of earning it." Rick's face turned red with anger. He had had enough of her attitude. Without thinking, he raised his cup of coffee and threw the scalding liquid at her. The woman gasped as the hot coffee splashed across her face and chest. She quickly wiped it off with her sleeve, her expression a mix of shock and fury. Before Rick could say another word, the woman reached into her purse and pulled out a badge. It was gold, with the words, "Police Chief," engraved on it. Rick's heart skipped a beat as he realized who she was. "Officer Dalton," she said, her voice cold and steady. "I'm Chief Evelyn Carter, the new police chief of Cedar Ridge, and I can assure you, this incident will not go unnoticed." Rick's mouth went dry. He had heard rumors that the town was getting a new police chief, but he had never expected her to be a woman, let alone an African-American woman. He stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but the words wouldn't come. Chief Carter stepped out of her car, her eyes locked on Rick. "You have a lot of explaining to do, Officer Dalton. But first, I suggest you call for backup, because as of right now, you're under investigation for misconduct and assault." Rick's hands trembled as he reached for his radio. He knew his career was over. He had let his prejudice and anger get the better of him, and now he was going to pay the price. The fallout from Officer Rick Dalton's reckless actions was swift and far-reaching. News of the incident spread like wildfire through Cedar Ridge, a town that had long been divided by underlying tensions between its residents and the police force. Chief Evelyn Carter's arrival had already been anticipated, but no one expected her first act as police chief to involve such a dramatic confrontation. Chief Carter wasted no time addressing the situation. She called an emergency meeting with the entire department, her presence commanding respect the moment she stepped into the room. Officers who had grown complacent under the previous leadership now sat up straight, their eyes fixed on the new chief. She didn't raise her voice, but her words carried the weight of authority. "What happened this morning is unacceptable," she began, her tone firm but measured. "It's a reflection of deeper issues within this department, issues that we will address head-on. From this day forward, there will be zero tolerance for misconduct, bias, or abuse of power. If you can't uphold the values of integrity and respect, you have no place on this force." Her words were met with a mix of silence and uneasy glances. Some officers nodded in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Chief Carter knew that change wouldn't happen overnight, but she was determined to lay the foundation for a new era of policing in Cedar Ridge. Over the following weeks, Chief Carter implemented a series of reforms aimed at rebuilding trust between the police and the community. She introduced mandatory sensitivity training for all officers, focusing on implicit bias and de-escalation techniques. She also established a community advisory board, inviting residents to voice their concerns and collaborate on solutions. One of her most impactful initiatives was the Coffee with the Chief program, where she met with residents in local cafes to listen to their stories and discuss ways to improve public safety. The program became a symbol of her commitment to transparency and accountability, and it helped bridge the gap between law enforcement and the community. As for Rick Dalton, his suspension sent shockwaves through the department. Officers who had once turned a blind eye to his behavior now found themselves under scrutiny. Chief Carter made it clear that no one was above the law, and her actions inspired others to hold themselves to a higher standard. The changes didn't come without resistance. Some officers grumbled about the new policies, accusing Chief Carter of being too soft or too idealistic. But she remained steadfast, reminding them that true strength lay in fairness and compassion. Slowly but surely, Cedar Ridge began to transform. Residents who had once feared the police now felt empowered to speak up. Crime rates dropped as the community and law enforcement worked together to address underlying issues. And Chief Carter's leadership became a beacon of hope, not just for Cedar Ridge, but for other towns grappling with similar challenges. By the time the investigation into Rick Dalton's actions concluded, the department had already begun to heal. His dismissal served as a stark reminder of the consequences of prejudice and abuse of power. But it also marked the beginning of a new chapter, one defined by accountability, unity, and a shared commitment to justice. As Chief Carter stood at the podium during a town hall meeting, addressing a room filled with hopeful faces, she felt a sense of pride. Cedar Ridge was no longer a town defined by its divisions. It was a community on the rise, guided by the belief that change was possible, and that it started with one bold step forward. The dawn of a new era had arrived, and Chief Evelyn Carter was leading the way. The dust had settled in Cedar Ridge, but the ripple effects of Officer Rick Dalton's actions continued to reverberate through the town. For Rick, the consequences were immediate and life-altering. After a thorough investigation, he was officially dismissed from the Cedar Ridge Police Department. His badge, once a symbol of authority, was now a reminder of his downfall. Rick stood outside the police station on his last day, clutching a box of his belongings. The weight of his actions pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had lost more than just his job. He had lost the respect of his colleagues, the trust of the community, and most painfully, his sense of self. As he walked to his car, he couldn't help but replay the events of that fateful morning. The moment he had thrown the hot coffee at Chief Carter played on a loop in his mind, a constant reminder of his arrogance and prejudice. But Rick's story didn't end there. For the first time in his life, he was forced to confront the biases that had shaped his worldview. He began attending counseling sessions, where he unpacked the deep-seated prejudices that had fueled his actions. It wasn't easy. Facing his own flaws was a painful and humbling process, but Rick knew it was necessary if he ever wanted to rebuild his life. He also reached out to community organizations, volunteering his time to better understand the struggles of the people he had once sworn to protect, but had failed so miserably. Slowly, he began to see the world through a different lens. The anger and defensiveness that had once defined him started to give way to empathy and self-awareness. Meanwhile, Chief Evelyn Carter continued to lead Cedar Ridge with unwavering determination. The incident with Rick had only strengthened her resolve to create a police force that truly served and protected all members of the community. Her reforms were gaining traction, and the department was beginning to reflect the values she had fought so hard to instill. But Chief Carter's journey wasn't without its challenges. Some officers resisted the changes, clinging to outdated attitudes and practices. There were moments of frustration and doubt, but Chief Carter remained steadfast. She knew that real change required patience and persistence, and she was willing to put in the work. One evening, as she sat in her office reviewing reports, Chief Carter received an unexpected visitor. It was Rick Dalton. He stood in the doorway, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, looking far more vulnerable than the brash officer she had first encountered. "Chief Carter," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but I wanted to apologize. What I did was wrong, and I'm truly sorry. I'm trying to be better, to do better." Chief Carter studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded. "Apology accepted, Rick. But forgiveness isn't mine to give. It's something you'll have to earn from the community you hurt. Keep doing the work. That's all anyone can ask of you." Rick nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in a long time he felt like he was heading in the right direction. As for Chief Carter, she returned to her work, her focus unwavering. She knew that Cedar Ridge still had a long way to go, but she also knew that they were on the right path. The town had faced its demons and emerged stronger for it, and as the sun set over Cedar Ridge, casting a warm glow over the streets, Chief Carter felt a sense of pride. The aftermath of the incident had been painful, but it had also been a catalyst for growth and transformation. Cedar Ridge was no longer a town defined by its divisions. It was a community united by a shared commitment to justice, fairness, and respect. And Chief Evelyn Carter was proud to be leading the way.